Pressure is building on Israel to address the humanitarian crisis happening in Gaza, and the United Kingdom is using an ultimatum to push for change.
This is the moment to act. So today, as part of this process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognise the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
The UK's announcement follows one from France yesterday when President Emmanuel Macron said his country would recognize Palestinian statehood also in September at the United Nations General Assembly. It comes just as a UN-affiliated report says a worst-case scenario of famine is unfolding in Gaza. We have two senior voices with us to discuss it all. Louise Blais is a former Canadian ambassador to the UN, and Jon Allan was Canada's ambassador to Israel, now a senior fellow at the Bill Graham Centre for Contemporary International History. Very glad to have you both on the program. And I throw the first question, Madame Blais, to you. What would recognizing Palestine as an independent state change?
Well, quite a few things. I mean, up until now, everyone's been hoping that Israel would participate in this process and that the state of Palestine would come into reality thanks to a negotiated settlement. As the chance of that are really decreasing, the world is saying, well, maybe we're going to have to proceed and have that step come first. What it could mean is it could actually mean right now Palestine is an observer to the General Assembly at the UN. It does not have a vote. It can participate in meetings, but not have a direct voice in a vote. And so it could, in fact, lead the Palestinian people to have a state recognition and a membership at the UN. They would need to be elected following even recognition of their statehood. But more and more people are starting to talk about states that don't necessarily have geographic boundaries. So we're into a whole new world now. In this case, obviously, they want the geographic location. But I think that the member states are running out of patience and want to put pressure on Israel.
Jon Allan, I want to talk about that ultimatum to Israel that's being issued here by the Brits, basically saying end the hostilities, let the food in, and if you don't do that, that we're going to go and recognize a Palestinian state. Is this an approach that is more likely to succeed than what has been tried before?
Well, frankly, David, I find the statement by the British Prime Minister bizarre and inappropriate. Recognition of Palestine is about the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the right of Palestine to become a state amongst nations. And it should not be used as a stick to try and coerce Israel into doing what, frankly, it's obligated to do, certainly in terms of ending the humanitarian crisis and ending in indiscriminate bombing, etc. On the one hand, it's good that the UK, one of the G7, along with France, has stepped up. But I would have hoped that the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, for example, would simply have stated that they are recognizing the state of Palestine, because, frankly, that's what should happen now.
Let me use your analogy of the stick. If the stick is intended to push for some kind of solution, some kind of end to hostilities, and to do so essentially within the next 5 or 6 weeks, is it likely to work? Jon, I'd throw it back to you, and then Louise Blais.
Absolutely not. Bibi Netanyahu said in the White House 10 days ago in front of the cameras that he has no interest in a two-state solution or a Palestinian state. He has the opportunity, frankly, to be integrated into the entire Arab world under the Saudi initiative, and that was mentioned in this declaration at the UN. And he won't agree to a pathway to a Palestinian state or negotiations of a state. So, frankly, the UK, I will bet, will be recognizing Palestine at the General Assembly.
So, Louise Blais, let me go to you because you know the United Nations well. You also know the international sense in which this all occurs. Keir Starmer and Mark Carney speaking today on the phone, just as the Brits have issued this ultimatum. Is there a pathway for Canada to do the same thing here?
Well, we certainly or seem to be going in that direction. We'll know only when it's announced, and certainly it wasn't in the speech of the minister Annan in front of the member states yesterday in New York. But I think slowly we have seen a shift in Canadian policy, and I come back to the reason for that. It is up until recently, it was really the cornerstone of our policy was that it had to be a settled agreement between Israel and Palestine that would create the state of Palestine. But now, on the one hand, we're saying exactly what Jon said, that the Israeli government does not seem at all interested in that. And second, we're seeing the suffering that is totally unacceptable, and the infringement of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. And so I think at this point, we'll have to wait and see. I think France is doing a lot of diplomacy. They said this conference was just a step in that direction. The president of France has said that this fall is when he plans to make France's position official. And I think there was a lot of corridor and a lot of meetings at the UN over the past 2 days behind the scenes to try to get a lot of European countries and Canada to follow suit.
We're talking, of course, in the context of the horrifying situation playing out in Gaza, the hunger, what has been called starvation, what is now on the cusp of perhaps being called famine, the very dangerous situation that's occurring there. But I also look at, in the context of Israel, they don't have a peace deal with the Saudis. They might have had one. France is saying, we're going to recognize the Palestinians regardless. The Brits saying, here's an ultimatum. We don't yet know what's going to happen with Canada. U.S. still seems to more or less have their back. Is Israel becoming more isolated? And if so, what will the context, what will the cost of that be? Louise Blais and then Jon Allan.
Well, I think it's been isolated for quite some time. I'll note that obviously they are boycotting this conference, and as are the Americans. There might have been a time where maybe a few more countries might have done so as well, maybe even Canada years ago, but not anymore. So I think but I'll go back a little bit to what Jon said. Despite this heat, and they've felt it for a long time, several months, if not years, but certainly since the conflict, it hasn't seemed to have changed the direction of their policies. So they are adamant that they are right, that until every single hostage is released and until Hamas is totally 100% dismantled, they will press on. So it's hard to see how they could be any more isolated than they already are.
Jon Allan, is there not just political risk, but a territorial risk of becoming ever more isolated?
Well, I'm very sad to say it, but I'd say at this point in time, given the humanitarian disaster, given the indiscriminate bombing, given the situation of Gazans on the ground, and given the abject refusal of the Prime Minister and many of his ministers to even acknowledge that it's happening, I'm sad to say that I think Israel's not just isolated, but it's becoming a pariah state. And that is very dangerous for Israel. I mean, I'm not worried about a country that has nuclear weapons and one of the largest militaries in the world, and certainly in the region. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the soul of Israel and its moral backbone. And what is going to happen in 2 or 3 years once the reality of what took place in Gaza becomes clear to everybody, when the rubble is taken away and bodies are found. Yes, Israel is isolated, and it's going to take time and a new government, a government committed to peace in the region, to begin to turn that around.
Jon Allan, Louise Blais, both former ambassadors, thank you so much for your time and for the context you're providing all of us here today.